Hello, hello. Welcome to season 5 of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I see way too many business people letting their businesses or their jobs run their lives versus them figuring out with real clarity about what they want their lives to look like and having their job or their business be the conduit to have that life that they absolutely love. I want to thank you so much for listening in to season 5. This season is filled with motivation, inspiration, leadership, and wisdom from some super interesting guests, and myself included. My hope is through our shared experiences, you will see a bit of yourself and move further into leading your own lit up life. If you're enjoying this podcast, please feel free to share with others and leave a rating, and a comment or two would be awesome too. Let's get going. Thanks again for being a part of our community.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am Debbie Heiser, and I work with entrepreneurs and business people to make a lot of money doing what they love to do without sacrificing what's important to them. I'm not afraid to talk about money because we do want financial freedom, but I also think it's really important, and this is a big crux of what I do, is to help people get really clear on what they want their life to look like so that the business is a conduit to that life, not the business running their lives. So welcome back. This month is the month of February. I am wanting to do something a little more traditional. I tend to sometimes not be super traditional on like categories or things that I'm talking about, but I want to talk about love. And there's a couple of concepts. So you're going to hear me talk about love in February. And then here in February, you heard Jessica Bonar last week talk about this polarity and how we're not our past, which kind of feeds into this. And then the next one that we have, I know you're also going to love, and that is Heidi Mitro. And she is also in February. All of my guests are great, but like Heidi and Jessica both have a fire for what they do, and I love it. So you're going to love that too. So I guess that fits into passion and love. But what I want to talk about today is really kind of this love for yourself. And sometimes, and Heidi talks about selfish, we think that we're being selfish because we're taking care of ourselves. And I want to kind of turn that over. I want to completely dispel that, because what I found through my life is that I have to take care of myself. If I'm not taking care of myself, I'm no good to my family. I'm no good to my clients. I'm no good to my friends. And then wherever I'm showing up, this old guilt and shame comes out, right? Because I'm not at my best. So we're going to dig into that. Now, some of you might be rolling your eyes going, oh, not another talk about massage. I'm not going to talk about like taking care of yourself with massage. That is a piece that I tend to do because it does help keep me healthy. And there are times that you just need other people to take care of you. And it's okay to have people take care of you. And so, but what I want to talk about when it comes to self-love is I've talked about this before. So some of you that have been following me for a while have heard this, but I think it's a really good reminder that we're like a vase. And that vase, for me, it's God, but for someone else, it might be source, it might be universe, whatever. So I'm going to use the more universal term of source, where we have a vase. And this vase is filled, this energy, this love, this like showing up, all of this. And I tend to talk in energy. This energy comes into this vase, and we are told over and over and over again to pour out into others. I don't know why, but semantics this year has been kind of my thing. But to me, Erica in an earlier podcast talked about how words have energy, and they are energy. And so when you think about pouring out and you have this vase and this unending supply is coming into your vase from the top, and you turn that vase to pour out into other people, what happens? Well, that unending supply is cut off. So therefore we pour out into people. And at first it feels good and we feel good about it. And then as we continue to go on and our bucket or our vase gets lower and lower, that's when we start to experience burnout. And when you experience burnout, that's when we start to resent it. And we say yes to things we don't really want to say yes to. And that resentment is felt by other people, right? And then we start to feel guilty about the fact that we feel awful about doing this thing that's supposed to be helpful and blah, 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 right? We get into this mode. Well, I'm here to tell you, standing tall, that vase that's getting that unending supply, what happens is then it fills up. And for some, it takes longer to fill up because we've been pouring out for a long time. And so then what ends up happening is people get our overflow. And even that word overflow versus calling it pouring out into other people, when someone gets my overflow, they're getting the best of me. It's not the last of me. I'm not pouring out everything of who I am. I'm letting people have my overflow of energy, of love, right? But the way that we do that, if you think about this vase, I always think about that kid's song, "There's a hole in my bucket, dear Liza," right? And sometimes what happens is we may not be pouring out into people, but we allow little holes to start popping up in our vase, which then drains us, right? Even though there's this unending supply coming into us, it drains us. Now, what does that mean? The holes are things that we're not doing to take care of ourselves. So to flip that, what are we doing to take care of ourselves? And I tend to look at these, although integration is my word. Earlier, you might have listened and I had other words picked out. Integration came to me like I have compartmentalized all of my life and it's time to realize I'm a holistic person and it's integration. So when we're looking at this integration, it helps sometimes to look at it in categories. What are you doing to feed your spiritual self? You know, when you think about source, what are you doing to fill up your soul? It could be walking in nature. It could be attending a church or a synagogue. It could be having a group that you meet with book study, right? Which falls into another one, but it could be spending really good quality time with your family, with your children, whatever that is. What fills your soul? Like for me, other than spending time with my family and friends, it's skiing, snow skiing. There's something about the silence. And even though I listen to some music for my rhythm, there's something about being out in nature and that just on the verge of lack of control kind of thing, right? And so give some thought to what do you do to feed your soul? And what are some things that you want to do to feed your soul? It doesn't have to be anything huge, right? I was talking to a friend and I said, dang, I have got to get back to my meditation practice. And she said, have you ever thought about like start small, right? Don't jump right back into 30 minutes right at a time. Every time you start your car, take a minute and do some meditation. For me, that's about listening. And so think about what is it that you do to spiritually fill yourself? And there are gamuts of things that people do to fill their soul. Some people play music. Some people listen to music. Some people dance. What is that creative piece of you that fills your soul? The other piece is your physical body. And what are you doing to take care of your physical body? In the food you're putting in your mouth? Like I know that particularly being the age that I am, if I have a glass of wine, I don't sleep well. So that honestly has changed. Now I still have a glass of wine every once in a while or a glass of champagne, but I find it changes the way I make decisions. If I know that I'm not sleeping well, then I choose not to drink it because it doesn't serve me. Same thing with sugar. Same thing with other things that I know affect my body. Now, I'm not perfect at this, so please don't take that way when I say that. But when you start noticing those things, I have this Aura ring now, and I bought it to really take a look at my sleep. And it's really helped me, excuse me, understand my sleep. And that has led to other things that then I've realized, oh, I have some things I need to work on with my gut health. Oh, there's some things I need to work on with actual movement, right? And being able to move. You see back here, some of you on video see my little treadmill that I tend to walk on. Excuse me, when I'm listening to my own podcast, sometimes when I'm on calls that I'm listening to. But what are you doing to take care of yourself physically, right? And in some cases, you may be able to like feed your soul by being in nature and going for a hike. Sometimes I tell people too, when you're trying to fill your soul, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're always around people. It's about in the silence, right? That we find this. I just listened to a great podcast this morning, actually on the Happiness Lab, about the importance of silence and the noise that we hear, not only externally, but our internal noise as well. So spiritually, taking care of your soul, physically, taking care of your body, doing movement, keeping that blood flowing, eating the things that honor your body. Then what are you doing to take care of your emotional self? So those feelings, I know for a long time, I grew up in a household. My parents are wonderful people. My mother was wonderful. My dad is a great man and taught me a lot. And they did the best with what they knew. But when I look at it, there wasn't a lot of emotional, like how to handle anger, how to handle sadness and being okay to be sad, right? Instead of Brene Brown calls it silver lining it, right? Or trying to solve people's emotional pieces. And so what I found, I have a couple of really good friends that I process through some emotional work with. And I know there are triggers for me that when I get annoyed with people driving really quickly, I'm like, oh, it's time to look at some emotional stuff, right? Like what's going on internally that's causing me to get annoyed with this person who didn't do something the way I thought they should do on the road, right? So some of those things will help point out to me, oh, maybe I've got some anger going on, right? That I need to take a look at. And what am I angry about? And then a lot of times, if I'm angry about something, there's sadness that's attached to that. And it's okay to be sad. And actually, it's best to process through the anger and the sadness so that you can have the joy in life. And so I have a few people that I can process that with. And I tell you what, part of that processing is doing what we call anger projects, having someone you trust. And I can tell you, I've thrown a lot of rocks in this lake screaming, like yelling about things, right? Because I'm mad, and it's okay to be mad and have that anger in a healthy way, right? And the guidelines are you don't hurt anyone else and you don't destroy any kind of property. So when you think, you don't hurt yourself or anyone else. And so when you think about that, it's important to find people in your life that you know you can process through those things. Some people scream into pillows. There's things that you can do to release some of the emotion that's there, but then also practicing dropping into your heart. And a lot of times I'll ask people, how's your heart? Versus how are you doing? And it stops people and it helps them think for a moment. What's happening? What's going on? How am I feeling about this? I have to admit, I started reading the Atlas of the Heart and I got busy reading some other books, but that one's on my list this year to think about what's the vocabulary that we use around emotion. So making sure you're taking care of yourself emotionally as well. And then also this whole, I'm going to put mental and intellectual health somewhat together in the realm that it's the mind. And so when you think about from a mental perspective, looking at what are those voices in my head? Is my critical parent out, really being critical of things that I'm doing? Am I beating myself up over certain things? If I am, it's time to process through that with a trusted friend and work through like what's happening there. What is it that I really want? Because usually when I'm being critical, there's a need in there or a want of something that I'm not being really clear about. And so making sure that I'm looking at that, making sure that I'm utilizing mental health experts to help me work through some things. There are a lot of people in this area that we get really low on our vitamin D and that have actual like emotional issues, the seasonal disorder that happens because of the lack of sunshine. So it's important that during this time of year, especially in most northern hemisphere areas, that we're taking our vitamin DK, that we're getting out into nature and breathing some fresh air, that if it's really bad, that we're using particular lights to help us with that. But also seeking out good professional mental health workers to help us work through some of these things. Along with that, intellectually, when's the last time you learned something new? For me, I'm a constant learner and I love to learn. So that's a big, big thing for me. Others of you might be, that's okay. It doesn't have to be like academic learning. It can be about, how do you make sourdough bread? How many of you picked up sourdough bread making during COVID, right? But like other things of interest to you. And so when we're learning something, that helps us continue to grow and continues to fill our bucket. What happens though is when we're not doing some of those things, and I might even point out that mentally and intellectually, emotionally and spiritually, even giving back, what are you doing to give back? And not just in writing a check, but are you going to volunteer somewhere? Are you helping out with certain things? So take a look at those areas and figure out, how am I filling that vase of mine? How am I, well, actually back up, not filling the vase. The vase is being filled by source, but what are you doing to make sure that you don't get holes in that vase, that there aren't any holes in your bucket? And so with that, I want you to just give some thought to, how can you show yourself some grace? How can you show yourself some love? Because everything comes from either love or fear. That's the universal law of polarity. And when we are fear-based, we're critical, we live in guilt and shame. And I have to tell you, I feel a real urgency to help people get out of these, what I call double binds, these loyalty pacts or contracts that we make with other people, that we don't want to make them wrong, or we have a desire, but then the double bind is this, we have a deeper subconscious desire that we just don't realize. And so if you feel like you have some of that stopping you from plugging up the holes and not having holes in your vase, please reach out to me. And you can go to my website at www.leadyourlituplife.com, and you can find that in the show notes, and sign up for a clarity call with me. I would love nothing more than to help you get really clear on what you want, so that you can start to show yourself some more self-love with grace and kindness, and making sure that that inner critic in the inside of your head is not beating you up. So with that, it's a wrap. Listen in next week to Heidi Mitro, and then I'll have another episode towards the end of the month about how then when you love yourself, it's so much easier to love and show compassion and empathy to other people. With that, it's a wrap. Have a great week, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Thanks so much for listening. The song Ride is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.